And when was the world last in a countdown quite like this to the hostage release due on Monday? And we have word from President Trump that the hostages are currently being gathered for that release. It's all still a promise, but consider the steps taken already, however fractional. A ceasefire is in place. The Israelis have retreated to an agreed position in the first phase of a withdrawal from Gaza, even if they are gathering forces there just in case. A prisoner exchange is being prepared. Gazans have begun returning home. For now, Trump is headed to Israel to watch over Netanyahu. Primarily, US troops will head a multinational force from a regional center. Some sort of a plan for the future, however undefined, is in place. That's been agreed by Israel, Hamas, and just about everyone else. No doubt at all that the road to peace ahead is crowded with ifs and buts, but it doesn't look impossible, not at the moment. Trump will be forgiven 1,000 sins if he can take this to a peaceful end. Let's take a closer look at how we got here.
We're at a momentous development in the last 2 years. We fought during these 2 years to achieve our war aims, and a central one of these war aims is to return the hostages, all of the hostages, the living and the dead. And we're about to achieve that goal. We couldn't have achieved it without the extraordinary help of President Trump and his team, and that and the courage of our soldiers who entered Gaza, and the combined military and diplomatic pressure that isolated Hamas, I think, has brought us to this point. And for the benefit of these families who will finally get to be with their loved ones.
As you know, last night we reached a momentous breakthrough in the Middle East, something that people said was never going to be done. We ended the war in Gaza and really, on a much bigger basis, created peace. And I think it's going to be a lasting peace, hopefully an everlasting peace. Peace in the Middle East. We secured the release of all of the remaining hostages, and they should be released on Monday or Tuesday. Getting them is a complicated process. I'd rather not tell you what they have to do to get them. There are places you don't want to be, but we are getting the hostages back on Tuesday, Monday or Tuesday, and that'll be a day of joy. I'm going to try and make a trip over. We're going to try and get over there, and we're working on the timing, the exact timing. We're going to go to Egypt, where we'll have a signing, an additional signing. We've already had a signing representing me, and very importantly, the hostages are coming back. As you know, they consider them hostages. They talk about them as hostages, but there are approximately 28. That whole thing has to stop, and we're going to see to it. Gaza is going to be slowly redone. You have tremendous wealth in that part of the world by certain countries, and just a small part of that, what they make will do wonders for Gaza. And I think you're going to see some tremendous countries stepping up and putting up a lot of money and taking care of things. But there's tremendous spirit like I haven't seen.
Israel and Hamas have reached an agreement for the release of Israeli hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. This was a long-awaited breakthrough that could point towards an end to this 2-year-old war in Gaza.
President Trump, you have the best crowd in the world. What do you guys have to say to President Trump?
US President Donald Trump, who helped broker the deal, said that both sides had agreed to the first phase of his plan, which included that Israel would pull back its troops to an agreed-upon line.
The hostages will come back. They're all coming back on Monday.
In fact, Trump made this announcement in pretty dramatic fashion in the middle of a live press conference after Secretary of State Marco Rubio whispered something into the president's ear and passed him a sheet of paper.
I was just given a note by the Secretary of State saying that we're very close to a deal in the Middle East, and they're going to need me pretty quickly, so I will take a couple of more questions.
The specifics of the hostages for prisoner exchange and the line of Israeli withdrawal, both of those were unclear, but Israel welcomed the deal and also said it was eagerly looking forward to hosting President Trump in their country later this week. Trump's announcement came shortly before 7 o'clock Eastern Time. That was almost 2 a.m. Thursday in Israel. It was something that was unequivocally welcomed by Prime Minister Netanyahu and his entire government. Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey were the countries that helped mediate this. Qatar, in fact, was one of the lead negotiators. And Hamas, the party that was involved in these negotiations, one of the two parties, the other being Israel, all indications were that the agreement would also allow, once the prisoner for hostage exchange happens, then there would be the entry of humanitarian aid into Gaza. Trump also went up on Truth Social and he announced that this is a great day for the Arab and Muslim world, that Israel and its surrounding nations, along with the United States of America, and he thanked the mediators from Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey who worked with America to make this what he called a historic and unprecedented event happen. The Israeli government has welcomed the completion of the first phase of the Trump peace plan. The big sticking point in Israel has always been about the return of all the hostages, both those who are alive and the ones who are dead. That final sticking point was resolved when Hamas finally agreed to give up the only leverage it had and release all the hostages, both those alive and those dead. All the living hostages, who are believed to be about 20, are expected to be released all at once. It could likely happen either Sunday or Monday. And the remains of up to 25 dead hostages will be returned in various stages because it could take longer to locate some of these dead bodies. Even though Israel and Hamas have now agreed to exchange the last hostages for the prisoners, it is still not clear whether this will actually end the war. But the big point of contention in Israel, and something that has been domestically a big issue for the Netanyahu government to deal with, is the return of all the hostages, particularly the ones who are alive. Netanyahu has demanded that Hamas disarms itself and also does not take part in any future governance structure in Gaza, both of which the terror group has publicly rejected. Netanyahu also said that he spoke with President Trump and that he would convene his government. In fact, the cabinet meeting happened Thursday to sign off on an agreement calling it a great day for Israel. Hamas, in its statement, has called on Trump, as well as the guarantors to the agreement, including Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey, to compel Israel to fully implement the agreement's requirements and not allow Israel to either evade or delay any of the conditions. Palestinians in Gaza received the news with great hope that it might finally bring their nightmare of the last 2 years, finally bring that to an end. Everyone was awake at 2 o'clock in the morning, glued to the news, waiting to hear when the truce might actually come into effect. Negotiations have been taking place in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, where the Trump administration's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff, along with Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner, joined in the dialogue. Ron Dermer, who is an advisor to Netanyahu, as well as Qatar's prime minister, were all present in Sharm el-Sheikh. Last week, Trump warned Hamas that many more of its fighters would be killed if the group did not agree to a deal by Sunday evening. Hamas then said it would agree to releasing all of the hostages who are held in Gaza, both living and dead, but it wanted to negotiate other elements of the plan. That evening, Trump said that he believed Hamas was ready for a lasting peace. He called on Israel to stop bombing Gaza. The war in Gaza began on the 7th of October 2023 after the Hamas-led attack on Israel, in which roughly 1,200 people were killed and more than 250 taken hostage. Since then, the Israeli military response has killed more than 65,000 Palestinians, including both civilians and combatants, according to data by the Gaza Health Ministry.
That day, a little more than 2 years back, when Hamas attacked Israel in brutality that defies belief, is when the uneasy balance all collapsed. It all goes back to that. Akanksha walks us through the steps since.
October 7, 2023 caught Israel off guard. That day, Hamas fighters and other terrorist militias attacked Israel. 1,200 people were killed, 251 taken as hostages from the Jewish community settlement of Kibbutz, back to the tiny Gaza Strip. A trauma that haunts Israel even today. But 48 hostages are still being held. Of these, only 20 presumably alive. It's these hostages that Hamas is still using as leverage. Now, 2 years on, since the Hamas attack, Israel's defense ministry has released some shocking figures. 1,152 Israeli personnel have been killed since the outbreak of the war. The figures include all soldiers, police officers, Shin Bet agents, and civilian security officers, all who died on and since October 7, 2023, whether in the line of duty or as a result of an accident, illness, or suicide. Most were killed during fighting in the Gaza Strip, Lebanon, and even the West Bank. Approximately 42% of the fallen were under the age of 21. Many of them young men in mandatory military service, with 141 over the age of 40. A wide age range of those who've lost their lives. It should be noted that this conflict has added more than 6,500 family members to Israel's circle of bereavement. And that includes 1,973 parents, 351 widows, 885 children, and 3,481 siblings. But don't forget that on October 8, 2023, Israel's government attacked Gaza. On 13th October, Israel began ground operations in the Gaza Strip. And on 27th October, a full-scale invasion was launched. And these 2 years have been as horrific for Palestinians in the enclave. Operations by the Israel Defense Forces have killed at least 66,000 people, roughly 80% of them civilians, injuring about 1,69,000. These are conservative estimates by the Hamas-run Health Ministry of Gaza, but international agencies believe that the true death toll is much higher. Let's now talk about displacement. The International Organization for Migration has reported that 90% of homes in Gaza have been destroyed or damaged. That's internally displaced 1.9 million people of the 2.1 million population because of the total blockade that Israel has imposed on Gaza. As a result, large swaths of the territory are experiencing an acute famine, killing at least 450 people. 150 of them are children. In September, an independent UN inquiry concluded for the first time that Israel had committed genocide against Palestinians in Gaza, a finding which the Israeli government has rejected. In fact, in December 2023, South Africa brought a case against Israel before the International Court of Justice. This for violating the UN Genocide Convention. And in November 2024, the International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants against Netanyahu and his then Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. The charges: war crimes and crimes against humanity. The Israeli government and its supporters rejected the warrants. The moot question being, has Israel achieved its war goals? Remember, Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu had set two main objectives for the war in Gaza. That to recover all hostages and to destroy Hamas, none of which have been achieved in entirety. In fact, the UN is yet to designate Hamas as a terrorist organization. So much so, only a few countries like the US and the EU, apart from Israel, deem Hamas as a terrorist organization. One that still exists in Gaza, even though many of its fighters have been killed in the last 2 years, with Israel eliminating a series of leading Hamas figures. Among them Ismail Haniyeh and Yahya Sinwar. Despite this, the group continues to operate. Nonetheless, Israel's enemies have weakened in a conflict that's no longer just limited to Gaza. Hezbollah, which is active in Lebanon, and Yemen's Houthis both have stood in solidarity with Hamas. All three terror entities believed to receive financial and material support from Iran. Israel took military action against all of these organizations. It killed Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah with an explosion in Beirut, a number of Hezbollah fighters in a coordinated attack of exploding electronic devices in September last year. Airstrikes on southern Lebanon have further weakened Hezbollah. And most recently in June this year, Israel's Air Force attacked Iran for several days. It severely damaged nuclear facilities along with US assistance. And the assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in central Tehran embarrassed Iran's regime further. What's noteworthy is the toppling of Syria's longtime ruler, Bashar Assad, by rebels in late 2024. That meant Iran lost yet another regional ally. meaning Israel's opponents, Iran, Syria, Lebanon, and Gaza, have all been dealt a severe blow, with Israel's military primacy now firmly established in West Asia. At a time Israel is socially fragmented on whether the country should continue its war in Gaza or not, and the global sympathy is shifting in favor of Palestine, with countries not just supporting the two-state solution and Palestinian statehood, the big question remains: will Trump's 20-point Gaza peace plan end this long-drawn conflict?